Hey everyone, I'm back. Today I'm going to talk about the Marie side stories from Dating Sim. This video was actually supposed to be posted last Friday, but I haven't had much of a chance to do any recording recently. I've been kind of busy. So, um, this video will be part one though. I still kind of don't have that much time to record, so I'm going to kind of break it up. I'm gonna talk about the first two parts of the Marie story, and then in the next video I'll talk about probably the rest. But also, I know I said I was gonna start talking about combat dispatched. That's gonna be the next thing I'm gonna talk about. But before I actually get to this, I actually do have volume 6 now for Dating Sim, so I'll probably get to that first, and then I'll come back to this. I'm actually up to book 4 in Cop Edits that will be dispatched, so I actually have a lot to talk with this. I can make a few videos for that, but like I said, I don't really have that much time right now to record. I'll try and get more recordings in, but like I said, every Tuesdays and Fridays I'm gonna be putting up videos. So, yeah, I'll be talking about the side stories with this video and the next video, then volume 6, and then combatants will be dispatched. So hopefully I can get through all of that, and then start posting videos how I want to again within this week, hopefully. But yeah, like I said, I'll just try and do a quick little summary of the first two parts. So yeah, the Marie side story, it's more or less an alternate telling of how things could have went. It starts off with Leon. He's spying to see the exact scene of when Olivia slaps the prince. So while he's waiting to see it happen, he ends up seeing that somebody else is also there. When he figures it out, he sees Marie, and he figures out what she's planning to do. She's planning to more or less do what she did in the main series, which is, switch places with Olivia. So Leon, more or less, when he sees her and when she's about to approach Julius, he quickly grabs her and pulls her away from the scene. So when he does that, he gets into an argument with Marie. And while they're arguing and whatnot, the actual thing happens, and Olivia comes and she slaps Julius, more or less. So now that Marie has missed her chance, she's more or less dejected, and she's sad because she figured that would be her only chance with the way her family is. If you remember her family in her new family, her reincarnated family, her house is in debt. So she figured if she can get in with the prince and start the harem route, she'd be able to make it big. She'd become the queen and everything. Her life would be set. That doesn't happen, and more or less the game goes the proper way that it's supposed to be. So after all of that happened, after Marie explained herself and whatnot with Leon more or less figuring out she was someone like him who got reincarnated into that world. He learned of her situation about not having that much money, so he took her out to eat. They went to eat, and more or less we learned a little bit about Marie and whatnot. We found out about why she's the way she is in terms of the way she looks. If you remember how Marie looks, she's pretty small, and it looks like she hasn't matured or anything. More or less, that's an effect of what she more or less did. She practiced so much healing magic that it stunted her growth. She's more or less as grown as she will get. She won't grow anymore. So we learn about Marie, things is going forward, and more or less Leon more or less asks her if not Leon, sorry, Marie figured since she couldn't get Julius, she'd ask Leon to help out with, trying to get one of the other capture targets. So she ends up trying to speak to each of them, and it all pretty much goes wrong. It fails. She doesn't actually succeed in capturing any of the other Jill, Chris, Greg, any of them. It all fails. So now she's really dejected. Like I said, her whole family situation, being what it is, and that the fact that she can't, get the life that she wanted in this new world. So yeah, she's pretty down about that. More or less, it goes on, and Leon more or less asks if she could introduce him and his friends to other nobles that she might know that have actual good personalities. Well, before that, before he actually asked Marie to help them, get girls, what happened was, Leon was more or less talking with his friends, Raymond and Daniel. They more or less seen how he's been interacting with Marie, and they figured there was something going on with them. So they asked him if he can get her to set them up with any other females. So that's how that whole Leon asking Marie to set them up happened. More or less, she does happen to know a few noble girls who kind of fit their criteria. They happen to be shut-ins, more or less. They don't act like how the girls at the academy usually act. Like I said, they're more or less shut-ins. One is lazy, one likes to paint, stuff like that. So they get introduced to the girls, and things go okay for the most part. Daniel and Raymond really are taken in with the girls. And they figure, these are like the best selection that they can get. So we move on forward. There's a party that happens just before the summer break. So the party is more or less divided by the different years. So all the first years, which is Leon and them, they attend the party, more or less. Not much goes down. Not much really goes down at the. Yeah, nothing much really happens at the party. More or less, what happens is they spot Marie and Leon. They spot Julius with Olivia and Angelica, more or less. They get into an argument, but then Leon, more or less, everybody's attention focuses on Julius and Olivia and them. But Leon and Marie ends up talking, and they more or less, what they talk about is he asks Marie if she regrets not getting with any of the guys, but it turns out Marie actually turns out to be okay with it. She figures her plan was actually kind of stupid, and she's actually happier this way. While they're talking, they more or less draw the gazes of everybody because they ended up more or less speaking so loud that everybody, after the whole argument with Olivia and them, they ended up more or less focusing on them because they were the only ones actually making sounds, and that after everything was going on. So they ended up running from the party, and as they get outside, Leon asks her if she has more or less anything she's planned for the vacation that's coming up. Marie more or less tells him no, and the fact that she doesn't actually want to go back to her house being what it is. So he invites her to come over to his place during the summer break. So he, more or less, she agrees, and they end up going over to his place. That was more or less the first part. Like I said, not much really happened, but it more or less changed the way the main story went. The second part more or less starts with Marie getting married, more or less. So this is what happened in the second part. They show you that she's getting married and she doesn't actually want to go through with it, and she's more or less going back, and her safety thing is relying on her brother. So at this time she's praying more or less if her brother can save her more or less. So they jump back to what happened, and more or less Marie, she stayed over by Leon's during the summer break, and during this time everybody's more or less figured Leon and Marie were a thing. His family, they more or less was treating her nice, whatever, because they thought Leon and her, like I said, were together. So, I mean, they've been together for a while. They get back to school. Oh yeah, during this time, over the summer, Olivia is back at the school. She's by herself, more or less. Remember, she's a commoner, so she doesn't have any money to actually go back home over the break. We come to find out that the whole thing with Olivia and the princes, Olivia actually is in a bad spot in that sense. She's in a kind of lose-lose situation. More or less, after the whole slap thing, she learned who the prince was, and she realized, what she had did. Now, the prince and all the other targets from the first game, they ended up falling for her, but it turns out Olivia actually doesn't want that. Her position being a common and whatnot, it kind of puts her in a tight spot, being that it's the prince and she can't turn down anything that he's actually doing to her. So all the advances and stuff that he's doing, she can't really formally turn it down, being that he's the prince. But at the same time, she doesn't actually want that. So in a way, we see the game from like a different perspective. The things that happened in the game happened, but did Olivia actually want that? Is what I kind of want to say. At this time, she the prince had already bought the slave for Kyle. Now it's like I said, it's going back to how it was in the game, and seeing as how Kyle is now Olivia's slave, she has to take care of him. Now she doesn't have the money to do that, so she has to go adventuring a lot. So we see things from a different perspective. Like I said, it turns out Olivia didn't want all of this to happen to her. She just, the honor student. But she can't really do that because, like I said, she can't reject anything that the prince's advances. Being that he's the prince, it kind of be like, she can't do that. She's below him status-wise. But if she does actually reject him and stuff like that, that'll put her in a different position with everybody else in the academy, being that they think that, she thinks she's so big because she's a scholarship student. So like I said, she's in a lose-lose situation. She doesn't want to be there in that situation, but that's how it is for her. So yeah, they end up having like a festival that goes on. So Marie more or less, this is when the whole bike race and stuff was going on. But what happened was Marie wanted to enter, but that didn't happen. So they ended up making a donut stand. So they ended up selling donuts, and everything was going good more or less. Marie was making some money. That's another reason why she wanted to do it. She wanted to win the money from the races. But since that didn't happen, they ended up doing the donut shop. That ended up making Marie some money. At this time, Leon had more or less messed up a few donuts, and we ended up meeting Angelica. Since he took his break, he went to the side. He ate all the defective donuts. At this time, he met Angelica. This is our first time meeting her, like actually meeting her in the side stories. And nothing really happens. They just have a little talk, and he realizes that Angelica knows who he is. So during this time, Marie is approached by Stephanie. If you remember Stephanie, Stephanie was the one that the girl who was more or less kept bothering Olivia in the main story. That more or less kept telling her that she was a pet to Leon and Angelica. So Stephanie approaches her and Marie, and more or less Marie was kind of cautious about it because she knew her role and what Stephanie would end up doing in the main story. So it turns out that behind her back, Marie's family more or less sold her off to Stephanie's family. Um, they would end up taking care of the debt of her family if Marie ended up marrying into Stephanie's family. So at this point, Marie figures there's nothing she can do. They don't really want to mess with how the story is gonna go, and she didn't, more or less, she didn't want Leon to get involved, whatever. So she ends up more or less saying her goodbyes to Leon and, going off with Stephanie and her family. So now we cut back to the wedding. The wedding's going on, and more or less, wait, before I get back to the whole wedding thing, Leon more or less, he tries to figure out what Marie is to him, and more or less, what happens is he's overlapping his younger sister from his previous life over Marie. They have a lot of similar tendencies. And in Marie's case, she overlaps Leon with her older brother. So they both kind of see that they had like they're more or less both projecting each other on their past lives onto each other. They see that Leon sees her as Marie being his little sister, and Marie kind of sees him as being her older brother. So Leon more or less, he prepares himself, and what he does is he ends up advancing the story in a sense. He goes after the pirates and he defeats them. So in doing so, he collects all the information that he needs about Stephanie's family and their part in the whole pirate thing. So now we jump back to the wedding, and Leon ends up breaking into the wedding. Now, when he does that, he more or less confronts everybody with everything that he has, all the information that he gathered, and the fact that he's taken down both Marie's family and Stephanie's family. More or less, he got all the evidence he needed of all their dealings, of what was going on, the whole marriage thing. So he more or less came to stop it. So he puts an end to the wedding. He saves Marie, and more or less, they more or less talk to each other and try and figure out who each other was in their previous lives, and they come to the conclusion that they're not related. What happens is they more or less, the way they explain it to each other, it kind of makes it sound like they're not the same person that they thought they were, because they did suspect that they were siblings, but because of the way they explained it to each other, the way he saw her and the way she saw him was not how they thought that they saw each other. So they came to the conclusion that they weren't siblings. So what happens is he more or less gets engaged to Marie at this point. So now, if you remember back in the main story, the pirates that Leon took out, they have one of the pieces needed for the saint to actually become the saint. They had the necklace. So more or less, Leon gives the necklace to Marie to hold on to. Oh wait, before that, they actually did go through the part with the whole what's it called, the other little festival where they had the charms. More or less, it happened more or less the same. Leon was trying to buy all the charms from the seller, but they ended up deciding to just buy one each. He bought one, Marie bought one. They ended up getting the charm that was good for each other, and they exchanged it. So now Leon gives the necklace over to Marie, figuring it didn't do anything for him. If she could just hold on to it, and you know the necklace kind of did have a slight effect on Marie, not really much of anything. She just says she feels a little something when she has it, so he had her hold on to it. So later on that night, there's actually something lurking inside of the old artifacts for the saint. Turns out that you would say the ancestor, I guess, their consciousness is still inside the artifacts. So while Marie is sleeping, it more or less tries to take over and possess her. It ends up entering her subconscious while she's sleeping, and it more or less it sees her, but it sees her Marie as her former self in her previous life. Now it tries to more or less bribe her and try and sweeten her up to try and possess her, but it doesn't work. Marie's personality is not really good, so she more or less distrusts everybody. So she already figured out more or less that the spirit that was trying to offer her power, that there was a catch to it. So being that nothing worked and it couldn't actually possess her, it tried to forcefully do it. So Marie ends up ejecting her. She uses the strongest thing that she can think of, which was her defense, which was her brother at that time. So they end up sending the getting rid of the spirit. It couldn't possess her, and when it exits from her consciousness, Luxion more or less captures it and tried to run back away into the necklace, but it didn't work. More or less, the spirit has been searching for somebody from its ancestors, and it's been, after being stolen and being passed around, it's finally found Marie that it thought it could take over, but it didn't work. So now we cut back to Olivia. Olivia, more or less, like I said, she because having Kyle and whatnot, she has to more or less do a lot of dungeon hunting and try and get stuff to keep her and Kyle. She needs money. So while she's doing all of that, she ends up. Oh wait, before we get to that, the trip that they went on. Remember, I said that the trip with the where they had the festival, where they had the charms. It kind of didn't happen like the game where somebody was supposed to be with Olivia at that point, one of the capture targets. All the guys ended up going to different. Remember, the trip had three places that they went to, and this was more or less the trip in the main story where everything moved forward fast, and they ended up fighting Gertrude, but that didn't happen in the side story. So it more or less goes along with the game, and now Olivia's by herself. Now she got sick during the whole thing, and on her way back, on their way back home from the trip, a lot of the girls, they figured this was their time, since none of the prince, none of them were around Olivia. This was their time to more or less get her. So she's sick, and they dragged her out to go gambling. Now, if you know, Olivia doesn't like gambling, but she was so out of it that she didn't really pick up on what was going on. So they dragged her out, and they more or less made her get a whole debt, something that she couldn't pay. So she more or less ran out of money, and they was more or less bullying her into dropping out of the academy. That was what they was betting on her. So Leon, more or less at this point, he steps in for her and he helps her out. Um, he shows that the girls were actually cheating. They had cards. They was using their servants, and the servants would more or less tell them what cards that Olivia had, and in this case Leon, and they had cards up their sleeve. So he ends up exposing them, and he ends up making them get into debt with him. So he more or less saves Olivia from all of what happened. Now we get back to Olivia and the fact that she needs the money and whatnot. So she goes, adventuring to try and earn some stuff. So she does, her adventure. She gets what she needs, and as she's about to leave, she runs into the girls again. Now, seeing that nobody's around to help her out this time, they end up pushing her off. Remember, that's where Marie found the bracelet. So they pushed her into the hole where the bracelet was, and when she falls through, more or less, remember what I said, the ancestor, the saint from before, it ends up possessing Olivia now. More or less, she gets possessed, and the ancestors more or less trying to take revenge on the kingdoms, trying to destroy the kingdom. So they end up finding Olivia like the next day, and they bring her back, and now it's not Olivia, it's she's being possessed. So she more or less uses the prince and the others to get rid of the girls that did this to her. So more or less that happens, and now Olivia is possessed. So that's more or less what happens in the second part. Like I said, this is just going to be a short video. I could continue on to the next part, but like I said, I don't have much time, and I want to put something out for you guys. So I might come back and talk a little bit more about some stuff in the first and second part in the next video. But like I said, I just want to put something up because it's been a week already. So this is it for now. Like I said, I'll talk more about it in the next video, and then I'll try and go into the next parts in the next video. For now, this is it for now. This is just part 1. I'll see you guys in part 2. Thank you again. Like I said, leave some comments. We can talk more. Join my Discord. And like I said, next video will be the next parts, as well as I might go into more depth into some of the stuff that I kind of skipped in this. Like I said, I'm just trying to get a video out. It's been a while. I know you guys, some of you wanted this video. So I'm sorry that it's short and not, as long as it should have been, like the other videos, but I'm just trying to get something out. So again, thank you. I'm gonna go into more detail next time. Again, like I said, leave some comments, subscribe maybe. Thank you again, and I will see you next time. But thanks. Bye.